Hey, welcome everyone to the webinar. I see people coming in. We'll just give it a few more seconds here and then we'll get started. Hoping everybody's having a great Thursday. Just give it a couple more seconds and then we'll jump in because we got a lot to cover today. And hopefully you all have your learning hats on, which is what, teachers say, I guess, nowadays. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and jump on in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the February Sandstorm webinar, Beyond the Tools, Mastering Web Usability and Accessibility. My name is Jana Feaster, and I am the Vice President of UX and Creative at Sandstorm, and I am your host today. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Caucasian female with gray curly hair pulled up into a bun and wearing a black sweater. The goal of this webinar is to share with you the best tips for improving website accessibility and usability. During the webinar, please submit any questions for the speakers in the QA channel. We'll address as many as we can toward the end of our time today. For general comments, please share those in the chat channel. If you're a game and would like your website to be part of our accessibility review, please add your URL to the chat and I'll make sure the speakers get it. To make this presentation more accessible, this session will have audio captions and will be recorded. Next week, we'll provide a human-corrected transcript and a link to the recording. Immediately after the presentation, we'll share today's deck. So without further ado, let's get started with Beyond the Tools and learning how to master web usability and accessibility. Over to you, Alma and Joanna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alma Meshes. I am Senior UX Architect at Sandstorm. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a Caucasian female. I have 2 French braids today, and I have blue glasses, and I'm wearing a black dress. And I'm really excited to share all that we have today. Joanna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna Jackson. I'm a UX specialist. I'm CPAC certified. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm wearing a black and white top. I am Caucasian female. I have curly hair and glasses. All right, so a little more about Sandstorm. Sandstorm has been in business for over 25 years, headquartered in Chicago, but we have teams all over the United States. We've been building digital experiences for associations, nonprofits, and healthcare organizations. We believe in research, and we've conducted a lot of it with over 4,600 hours of usability and UX research that we bring to every project. So we already come to the table knowing what many users need, and we can make great decisions together based off of that research. Many of our staff are CPAC certified for accessibility. We also have specialists in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we have a WBNC certification, which is a women-owned business.
So we like to start with some fun facts before we're going to jump into our examples. So our first fun fact is that 1 in 4 US adults, or about 27% of the population, have a disability. So what does that tell us? There's a lot of audience out there for us to think about when we're looking at accessibility. And a not so fun fact is, unfortunately, only about 2% of all websites meet accessibility standards. So we're hoping today that we can help bring up some of those numbers with you all who are going to be our champions in your organizations. And so at Sandstorm, when we think about accessibility, we focus on those who have a disability, people who are using assistive technology, and anyone with a temporary disability. So this could be things as simple as, I broke my hand and now I'm wearing a brace. It could be someone holding a child or helping someone. It could be someone who's distracted or in a high stress situation, or someone who is aging and experiencing loss of dexterity and vision. We also want to ensure that users have an optimal experience no matter what device they are on. So we don't just think about it from one perspective, we kind of think about accessibility from all of those perspectives.
A few more not so fun facts. So there has been an almost 300% increase in website accessibility lawsuits since 2017. And these are the ones that go to court. Cases that settle are often even more. So it is a legal requirement for websites to maintain a certain level of accessibility. But the unfortunate truth is we've seen many organizations run into legal trouble because someone did a scan of their website and initiated a lawsuit because they were not in proper compliance. And over 20% of lawsuits are using widgets in 2024. So as of July 2024, 503 lawsuits against websites with active widgets compared to 449 suits in 2023. And we're speaking about this in light of the current FTC lawsuit against a very popular overlay in this space. And so purpose of today is to really say, there are manual checks that you can do, and we're going to walk you through some of those so that you're not relying on those accessibility overlays that are being highly scrutinized at the moment. And there is some good news. So building, testing, and updating your website following WCAG guidelines will remove the need for overlays and help reduce the risk of legal action.
All right, so let's get going on looking at how we assess these. So at Sandstorm, we use a mixture of automated tools and human testing to get the best results. So there are lots and lots of tools out there that can help us make sure that our site is accessible, but in the end, it's really people who are using computers. That's who our users are, and that's who we make websites for and apps for. So we need to make sure that humans are checking that the computers are doing all of their work properly. And sometimes the computers miss things. So we want to make sure that we're collecting those and making our site as accessible as it can be. So here we like to use, again, like I said, automated tools. So these are really code level review that give you a pass fail on particular elements. So some of those tools that we use are Axe Core Dev Tools. This is a tool provided by DeQ. It's a in-browser tool that allows you to install an extension on Chrome and various other devices to look at the code of your page and see how it's performing. Pally is another tool that is an automated scan of individual pages, and the same thing with Wave. So these are all different tools that we use to look at on a page-by-page basis how our site is performing. And we'll show you a couple of these today during our examples. But what we really want to focus on are human testing. So the automated tools are really great at giving us a high level of what things are broken, giving us a list to send over to our developers of things that we can enhance and improve. But at the end, we need to make sure that we're collecting all of the things that the tools missed. So in our manual review of a site, we look at things like the visuals, the content of the site, how the site is navigating, and if navigation is accessible to everyone, and the functionality of the site. So today we're going to jump in and show you some of those things that we look for and give you ways that you can start creating that list of opportunities for enhancing the accessibility of your site. So Jana, do we have any volunteers in our group here that we can look at
No,
our first thing? Uh-oh,
not
no.
yet. No, but
We
if
won't be-
anyone, please add your URL to the chat. We'd love to have some live website. If not, we have other ones ready to go, but add your URL if you'd like for us. Oh, Stella, of course, Stella.
Thank you so much, Stella. Awesome.
So as a reminder, Stella is from asppph.org.
Excellent.
Thanks, Stella.
All right. So I just want to preface this by saying I'm going to be looking over here at the right-hand screen. I have a second window open so I can wizard both of these screens. I'm not trying to ignore. I love making eye contact. And also the spirit of today is to be collecting things that we can improve. So none of this is meant in a mean spirit. If we use your site and there are things that are opportunities for improvement, all we can do is go up and increase the accessibility and usability of everyone's site. So we really appreciate that you are offering your sites today. I know it can be a very vulnerable space, but this is a safe place. We want to look at the opportunities that we have and give you ways that we can help enhance those. So we really appreciate it. It makes it more fun when we can look at real websites instead of us just having a bunch of examples all ready to go.
And we have
All right.
two more that I've offered
I
up,
do
Alma,
see
if you
two
want
more.
those.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to jump to a second one. I'm going to jump to Nelson Jameson instead,
Okay.
because I know that we are going to use ASPPH for a later one. So Stella, thank you so much for being our first volunteer and opening the door for us. And let me just copy this really quick. Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. So the first thing that we're going to look at is navigation. So navigation is the way that users can explore our site. And this is really important because, we want them to be able to get to every page of our site. And so navigation is this little area right here at the top that is a list of all of the different pages that are available. And so the first thing that we like to do is we like to do a tab test. So what I'm going to do right now, without having clicked on anything else on the site, I'm just going to hit the tab key on my keyboard and see what it does. So I'm not seeing it do anything here. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to be clicked into the browser. There we go. I was in the Zoom. Sorry about that. So at the bottom, you can see there's a little yellow tab that opens up down here that says nelsonjameson.com/about us. So it has highlighted something on this page. And we can see over here that it's highlighted this button at the bottom as the first thing in the page. So I'm going to refresh one more time just to make sure that I didn't do anything goofy here. Okay. So we've started up here at the top instead. I had clicked over to the page. So the browser thought that I was trying to make some kind of interaction. So it skipped me to that about button down here at the bottom. But first we start off here at the contact us. That's great. It is kind of the first thing on the page. And then when I tab again, you can see that there is an outline around the logo. So that's excellent. We're giving users the ability to see that logo. And then next, it kind of skips around a little bit. It's moved into the search box, but it's a little bit difficult to see that because you can see there's an icon kind of bouncing in there, but it's pretty subtle. So we might want to increase the accessibility of that by putting that same outline that we saw around the logo. We might want to also include that around the search bar, just so that people know that's the thing that's active. As we continue to tab, you see that we've gone over to the My Account, and the My Account now has an outline around it. We've got an outline around the shopping cart, and then we've moved into the page down below. So what we really want is for the icon to move down to these product sections, dairy solutions, services, so that we're following the order of the navigation throughout the page. One other thing that we typically look for when we're reviewing a navigation to make sure that it's highly tabbable is we want to make sure that when it highlights on our navigation items, we can see here that there's an arrow indicating that there's additional pages here. And if I click with my mouse, I can see that that expands open. Typically, when you're using a keyboard to interact with things and not a mouse or tapping on the screen, the space bar would be the indication for those to open up, and then using your arrows or the tab button to navigate through those. So there are some opportunities here to improve the accessibility of this navigation, just in making some of those changes. So updating the tab order so that we're kind of following the logical order of the elements on the page, and then providing highlights around each of the navigation items and allowing users to tab through all of these different pages that we have underneath. Next, we'd like another URL. It looks like I have one here from wftc.wa.gov. So thank you for that. I'm going to click that one open. Perfect. Okay, so for our next item that we look at, we want to look at our buttons. So buttons and links need to have more than color to be clickable and understood as clickable to users. So what we're looking for is we're going to go look for some buttons here. So I see some buttons right here at the very beginning. So this is nice because we have two buttons. They're a little bit different colors from each other. And we want to hover over them with our mouse to see, do they do anything? Do they have any kind of change or interaction when I make a hover action? So just putting my mouse over those. So we can see that this first button does turn into a white button. So that's nice. There are a few things that we could do here that maybe could give us a little bit more visual cues to indicate that this button is even more clickable. So we could change it. It's going from an outlined to a solid color, so that's pretty good indication that it's a text. We could also think about rounding the corners of this button to really make it stand out and make it look a little bit different. We could also provide an underline under this, but this one is looking pretty good. For this one over here, we do have a subtle color change. It might be hard to see through the zoom here, but we're going from kind of a leafy green to a darker leafy green. So this one, we'll talk about contrast in our next little segment here. This one could use maybe a little bit more bump up, or maybe an underline, or again, that change in shape to indicate that something's happening here. We've also seen other things where there are more branded opportunities for doing things, so they could reflect more of your brand styling. We could do something fancy with the button. They could have kind of a little backdrop behind them, and then the backdrop goes away. So there are lots of different ways that we can indicate that buttons are making a change. We want to make sure that we're using those visual indicators like shape changes, underlines, and definitely color changes to indicate that these are buttons and that they are clickable. Joanna, over to you.
Awesome. All right. So moving on to the next one here. So many users struggle with contrast. So we are going to move over to the adea.org website here. And just to talk a little bit more about poor contrast. So poor contrast can lead to essential or helpful information being missed, not only by users who experience color blindness or low vision, but also by people who have perfect vision. So the lower the contrast, the more difficult it is to see elements in text that are important to that successful digital experience. So what are we looking for? What is the benchmark color contrast ratio? For normal text between 18 and 24 pixels, you want to meet the minimum ratio of 4.5 to 1. And for regular text that is 24 pixels or larger, that ratio is going to drop to a 3 to 1 ratio. So we use some online tools that like the WebAIM contrast checker or Wave to evaluate a website's contrast ratio quickly and kind of on the fly. Alma is going to be using the Wave in this instance, but the WebAIM is also a really helpful one. So some of the things that we manually look for to see if the content has a high enough contrast, and if there is text over an image, we really want to check for that contrast as well. So looking down at this application services section, we can see with the Wave tool that we've got some flagged for contrast. So that text, that wider text over that orange background is not passing that ratio that we're looking for. So that ratio is a 2.68 to 1. And again, we're shooting for at least a 3 to 1 for that large text size. And then you can see again on the little buttons with the link text, it's not passing that contrast ratio there. So this blue and white one in the middle, off to the left just a little bit, is passing. And so we're not kind of getting that signal, but additionally, the rest of the other ones are. So what we can do here is in Alma, once you hover, especially that hover state, it's going to lose even more contrast. And that's a common thing we see, is even sometimes the text over a background will pass contrast, but the hover state will not. And so you want to be checking at all different states that your text could be at. So we could either darken the background here or brighten some of the colors. And so and we can kind of just, as you can see, Alma's actually able to play with that color picker there to see what that better contrast might look like in these instances. All right, so the biggest tip here is that, again, what we're providing you is WCAG AA, but if you really want to aim to at least do AAA, which are even more just more stringent, higher standards. And if you're aiming for AAA, the odds are you're at least going to pass AA, which is really what we want to shoot for to make sure that our websites stay in compliance. So another helpful tool that we use is a contrast grid. So often we will see that an organization's brand colors can make it difficult to have that wide variety of color combinations that pass that AA standard. So we'll often utilize this more advanced contrast grid to evaluate, and now Alma's pulling it up here, and Jana has dropped a link as well. But we'll use this more advanced contrast grid to evaluate all color combinations and identify which ones we can use in an accessible manner on the website while still reflecting that brand identity. So on this example, particularly, you can see the ones that are passing and the ones that are not passing. And so you'll see even that AA 18 that is in some of that, in that little yellow bar. That's saying, okay, this will pass if your text size is 18. And so you want to make sure too that we're being very careful about our font size here as well. Originally, their brand color was this magenta, this brighter pink, and that was not as accessible. It wasn't passing the ratios like we'd really like to see. So we darkened that brand color just a little bit for links specifically so that we could get more use out of that, get a little bit of higher contrast there and still reflect the brand color. So we highly recommend this tool as you kind of play with your brand colors and maybe expand that palette to be more accessible for all your audiences. So biggest takeaway here, leverage free tools, understand your target contrast ratios, and test all of your colors to make sure that they're passing contrast. All right, moving on to the next one. So Stella graciously sending the link for ASPPH. So this is the ASPPH homepage. And as you can see, they have a rotating hero image. A lot of times users, unfortunately, see this auto rotating image and think that it's an ad and that they're advertising something instead of really taking the opportunity to leverage this space to talk more about your organization and what you're doing. Users start to just scroll right over it and breeze by it. So even if it is, as it is rotating, even if they do try to read it, often it's rotating too quickly for them to even read it, even if they want to. Again, the hero section of your homepage is one of the most important and one of the very few opportunities with limited attention spans these days that you have to quickly introduce your site and its mission. From an accessibility perspective, auto rotators are not accessible because the user also cannot stop it from changing. So what was once an opportunity to showcase a lot of content has now quickly become a section that is inadvertently increasing a cognitive load and not giving the users the level of control that we want them to have. Now, this is a really great example because they actually do employ an accessibility overlay, which is something that we've been talking about. So down in this left-hand corner, you can see that if you expand that accessibility overlay and hit pause animations, that it will pause some of the motion on the site. But you can see it's pausing the video below it, and it's not actually pausing that auto rotating hero image. So we're still getting some movement in there. It may have slowed it down a little bit, but this is not a completely accessibility compliant approach, even with using this overlay. So that's something that, it's a really great example of the effort is there with the overlay, but how we still have to be really mindful. So what are some of the ways that we can help improve a hero section like this? If we do want rotating content, if you've got a lot of people on your team saying we need to feature a lot in this hero section, you can still do that in a way that gives users control. So we never want this to start rotating automatically. You'd want to provide arrows, and only once the user activates movement do we allow for movement. So Alma's kind of showing here on the right and the left, we could put arrows there and let users scroll and rotate through it. There are also options where you have a more static hero on your left or your right, and then you could have some news or some announcements with arrows that kind of scroll up and down with more featured content that's a little more static until that user activates it. So that's one of the big things. And the other thing is making sure that those arrows, if you add them, right, that they have good contrast. It's something else we see is maybe arrows are available, but we can't always see them, especially as things move, the colors might change. And you have to make sure that that arrow is always visible and always meeting that contrast ratio, no matter what the background is. It's a really great way to use the contrast grid that we were just talking about as well, to say this is the color of all the different backgrounds that this arrow will be on. Is this working? Does this pass? And then the last thing is, if we look down at these dots here at the bottom, it is showing how many things are in this rotation. But again, it's increasing my cognitive load for me to have to count and figure out how many there are, where I was, to go back and forth, versus changing those to numbers that say one of 5, 2 of 5, etc. users quickly know which one they're on and how to get back to the number that they were trying to read. So the big takeaway here is that make sure that your rotators are user activated and that the controls are easy to use. And again, looking forward to making those improvements in the future. Make sure that any arrows you add or numbers to show the order are always going to pass that contrast ratio that we just talked about.
Joanna. So for our next example, we want to move over to another organization that has graciously allowed us to take a look at their site. And that is the site here, American Public Power Association. So thank you, shout out to them for helping us out with this. So in this area, we want to take a look at content. So we've looked at buttons, we've looked at tabbing, we've looked at contrast, but now we want to get into the actual content of the page. And one thing to keep in mind is that users don't read. So as much as we spend a lot of time thinking about the content and writing very careful words, unfortunately, users are just in a hurry. They tend to scan blocks of content and look for things based on a visual hierarchy. So what that means is just a fancy word of saying how it's organized on the page. So we're going to take a look at this page here on Public Power Association website. And we picked this page because it's a little bit different than a typical content page. So a typical content page is going to have, blocks of words with some subheadings, headings, maybe some bulleted list, things like that. But we wanted to pick a page and show you that even pages that don't have those blocks of content on them still need to be organized in a hierarchical fashion. So typically users on the web read in what's called an F formation. So you can think about that as drawing just kind of a big letter F on the page. So they read up and down, and then they read right to left. And so we want to make sure that the content that's most important is up here in the left-hand corner, and then decreasing priority as we move down the page. And we can do that with having a clear hierarchy. So what that means is we want to make sure that there's bolding, there's subheading, there's bulleted lists, and things that allow users' eye to kind of flow through the content of the page. So in this page, if we take a look at it, we can see that we've got some headlines here and a little subhead. Like Joanna said last time, there's a little bit of opportunity here because we've got some text over an image. Some of these colors might be a little bit difficult to read, so we could maybe increase some contrast there. But overall, this is good from a hierarchy standpoint. We know that the page is called Education and Events, and we've got a little subhead here. This is also a little bonus thing here. We've got a breadcrumb, excellent to have on your site. This helps users navigate through when they can't access things like our top level navigation or any other links or things throughout the page. This allows them to quickly know where they are within the website. Beginning to the layout of this page, it has a lot of nice things happening for it. So we've got two kind of promoted events up here at the top. So this featured meeting and featured conference. And we've got some great things here that are showing some hierarchy, giving us a way for our eye to kind of navigate through each of these things. So we've got the date in this corner over here that's a very bold color. We've got some text here and the title of the event. So these are very large, easy for us to see. Again, one thing that we might want to think about in the future for some of these featured ones is we've got text over an image. So again, we could run into some contrast issues there. But again, these are looking pretty good so far. We've got a way for users to interact with this grid of items below it, allowing them to really take control over how this is organized. So that's really nice too. And we've got the date icons or this date style happening again with the title over a white background, much better for contrast. And then we have some of them that have some additional labels. So down here, again, we want to keep the labels consistent. So if they have labels, we probably want to use labels on all of them so that we know that this is a virtual event or is it an in-person event. We're not really sure as a user what the difference is between them. So if we're going to include it, we should include it for all. Or if we're not going to include it, then we should remove it from the ones that have them. And then as we move down this page, we can see that there's some additional content. This is all lovely formatted as well. We've got bulleted lists, we've got some italic things, we've got links that are a different color, some bolding, and then headlines. So this left side of the page is looking very nice from a hierarchy perspective. But then when we look at the right side of the page, we start getting into some things that have some opportunities for improvement here. So one, we've got navigation here in kind of an unexpected place. So typically navigation happens either at the top of the page, in the center of the page, or on the left-hand side of the page. So this over here on the right-hand side is a little bit unusual. We could do some testing with users to see if they understand that this is navigation and it's working for them. And maybe this site has done some of that testing and proven that this location works for navigation. But typically that is an unusual spot for navigation. So we want to be careful about putting nav in an unusual place. Another thing to think about as we start scrolling down this right-hand column is we're now introducing a secondary logo here that's a little bit different than our primary logo for the website. And so this could start to cause some confusion about where are we? Are we looking at the right thing? Is this an advertisement or is this some other organization? Users might question, why are we having this extra logo here? And then we can start to see some of the same items in this list down here that have similar names to the items that are in this sub navigation over here on the right hand side. And then if I dig a little bit further and I start looking at some of the event types, I also see some of those listed in here as well. So here's where we've run into a little bit of an issue that could use some improvement and cleanup, because we're giving users multiple ways of finding the same kind of information in the same page, but then it starts to confuse, and there could be users that get upset because is the full list of meetings here under meetings under events by type when I click on this and it updates the list, or do I get the full list of meetings by clicking on this link over here on the right hand side? Or do I need to go to one of these up here because some of these could maybe mean meanings as well? So we want to be really intentional with how we are displaying content to users and try to avoid things that could cause confusion with links to the same type of content. So if we're going to use this grid over here, we want to make sure that users can have access to all of the content types that are available for this grid. And then if we really need a different navigation, the navigation should be to other pages within the site, or try to integrate the two navigations with each other. So maybe providing a left-hand navigation that shows all the subpages in the section. Perhaps meetings is its own page, but when I click on that, I would anticipate that I would get the exact same items as I get here in this little results table. So as we think about hierarchy and users reading, we just want to make sure that we're breaking up the copy with scannable headlines, subheads, bullets, and other visual aids so that there's a clear structure. And when we review the content, we want to make sure that we're not causing confusion by adding additional words that could have the same meaning on the page. And then an additional thing that we want to look at for content is we're going to look at another page on this American Public Power Association site. So this site has some resources. A lot of websites out there have resources, very, very popular. And many organizations like to put their content on their website as a PDF. So one thing that we try to encourage all of our clients and people that we talk to is to try and avoid PDFs if we can. So if we can take that content out of a PDF and have it be content on the website, that makes it the most accessible. Then it doesn't matter what device I'm on or where I'm trying to access the content. If I have a browser and I have an internet connection, then I should be able to get to that content. A PDF, unfortunately, creates a bit of a barrier. Now, we know that we can't turn all content from a PDF into an HTML. There are some things that are just too large, or there's a lot of formatting that adds additional context to that content, or we just don't have the resources to convert all of our PDFs into that online content. So we understand that PDFs are a necessity of the web right now, but we try to advocate for converting as many of those to HTML as we can. But when we can't, then what we want to do is we want to create a page like this, which would be a PDF landing page or portal page. And so what's really nice about this page is that it gives us some introductory content so that users can understand exactly what kind of content they're going to be getting in the PDF before they take the action to download it. So this is really considerate of users that may be on limited bandwidth. They may not have the right resources to access and view the PDF content, and we're giving them a chance to say, ooh, this may not be the exact thing that I want. So they're not taking up space on their computer because maybe they have limited space as well. So all of those things allow the user to have more control over what they are downloading and accessing, and to make sure that they are prepared with whatever assistive technology they might need to be able to access that content for themselves. So here we've got that little introduction text. We've got some bullet points telling us what's inside of the report. And then our only opportunity for enhancement here is that we've got this link here that says download the report. But we also have kind of a stylized call out over here on the right-hand side that says related downloads, and then has a text link that says 2024 Public Power Statistical Report. These two links both link to the same place. So unfortunately, this could cause a little bit of confusion for users because they might not be sure if they're supposed to download this one or if they're supposed to download this one. So the opportunity here would be to just create one link, pick the style that we're going to use, and then make sure that's consistent across all of our resources. So if we're going to use this stylized version over here, then we want to make sure that all of them use the stylized version. Or if we're going to have download, then we want to put that down here and then remove this over here. A couple of other ways that we can plus this up to make it even more accessible and usable is to add that the report that we're downloading is a PDF file type. Again, some users don't necessarily have access to all of the things that they need to view a PDF. So letting them know in advance that they may need to download some kind of additional software or a viewer in order to be able to see that content is really helpful. And then finally, we would want to include the file size. Again, for someone who might be on a low bandwidth or on a limited connection, giving them this information allows them to know how much of their bandwidth they might be using. Typically, PDFs are pretty small, but sometimes we've seen some reports that are very, very large, and can take a while to download. So it's giving users more of that information so they can make a good decision when they're downloading and accessing content. And then Jana, do we have another URL in our list here that we can use?
We do not yet, so
Okay,
go
that's
ahead.
okay. I think, Joanna, do we want to go back to one of the other sites that we were at previously?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I think we wanted to go to the ASPPH site.
Yeah, so we can look at this one. So the next one, and this is a bonus tip we are giving you all today. So just one more is that all images need alt text. And we say the word alt text, I'm sure you all have heard it a ton, but there's a lot that goes into alt text. There's a lot of different types of alt text. And before we dive into that, we're going to actually look at the ASPPH site and see if we can find some on the site here. So let's just keep scrolling, and we see we've got these really nice images for these testimonials. And so the way we can quickly check for alt text is by going right-clicking, hitting that inspect button. And that's going to open up in here, and we're going to be able to see in the highlighted section if there's alt text. And as we can see, and you can kind of look, it'll say alt, and then there's typically a description that follows. We do not have alt text for this image. And so this is a really great opportunity, and I'm going to actually answer a question that we received while I answer this next step. So one of the questions we got was, how can we improve the website UX to reduce bounce rates, but also optimize SEO for better search rankings? One of the best ways that you can do that is by using SEO key terms and key search phrases in your alt text images when appropriate. So the way that we would look at this image, we could describe this person and say, we could just say this is a girl smiling for a headshot, but that doesn't really give us much context about the meaning behind this image or how it plays into the larger ASPPH ecosystem and the value here. So an alt text that would be better would to say, ASPPH member and Masters of Public Health student, and then give her name and then a short description. You could say smiling for a headshot. And that would be a much more effective alt text that ties in and bridges that gap between that testimonial on the right, the image, and then also bringing in the ASPPH brand and mission into that and saying that they feature students, that they've got Masters of Public Health students and their faces here as well. So it's a really great opportunity to, as you go throughout the site and have images, to look at some of your keyword research that you've done, phrases that are frequently searched, and find ways, not just shoving them in, because we've all seen when people just shove in SEO keywords, or you see people do it on recipe sites a lot, where it tells you a million things about the recipe before you just get to it. We don't want to do that, but being strategic about it and saying, are there opportunities for us to put keywords potentially in to some of our alt text images is a great way to help boost your SEO as well. So a little bit more about alt text and all the different types. So there are 3 different kinds of alt text. There's standard alt text. It's less than 250 characters and it conveys the purpose of an image. So for example, like we were just talking about, if you had a magnifying glass in your search bar, the alt text you'd want that to be search, not magnifying glass, even though that is what it is. But we're more concerned with the meaning and what it's trying to convey to our users than the literal item and what it is, because that's not going to drive that connection that we're looking for. So something we see a lot, that's a kind of a common mistake that's made in our pursuit of creating alt text. Next, we have short text. So short text is more than 250 characters. It still conveys the purpose of an image, but that image is more complex. It may involve a person or a group of people. And then finally, there's long text. So long text can be as long as you need it to be because it's used for complicated images. So example of a complicated image would be an infographic or a chart. And it's going to need that HTML equivalent, and it also requires alt text. So now that you know the different types of alt text, we still get a lot of, Joanna, how do I know when I need to write alt text? What type of alt text, like, or people just start kind of shooting in the dark, and we don't want you to shoot in the dark. So we made you this lovely decision tree, and we've got one for simple and one for complex images. So for simple images, a photo or an icon, you have to ask yourself, is there a person in the image? If yes, then you write a short description. If no, and you can describe the word in 250 characters, you would write alt text. If you could not write it in 250 characters, then you write a short description. So this one really relies more on actually that length of the characters and whether or not there's a person in the image. And those are really the 2 decision points that you rely on whether or not you write a short description or you write alt text. For complex images, it's really simple. If it's a chart or a graph or an infographic, you write alt text and you write that longer image description. The ultimate, really the key theme that we want to focus on when we talk about alt text is just, we want it to be an equitable experience for everyone. And so whatever message that a user who can see the image derives and meaning from it, we want that meaning to be translated in all of the ways that we communicate that image through our alt text.
Thank you, Joanna. All right. So if you have your screenshotter ready to go, this is our slide here with our 5 takeaways for today. Hopefully we presented you with some interesting things to think about and ways to approach making your sites more accessible and more usable. Feel free to share this on social, tag us on it if you have additional questions. We do have about 15 minutes left, so we were hoping that we could open it up to some additional questions. Jana?
Yes, actually, we do have a question. This is from Stella. So, how can UX improvements keep our website valuable and engaging these days where AI-driven search results provide answers directly, reducing traditional site visits? That's a good question.
Yeah. So AI is really encroaching upon every part of everyone's website these days. AI results are being shown above traditional search results. So it's a little bit of the Wild West right now while all of the different search engines change their algorithms and figure out where they're going to land. But our stance has always been that if you're creating a good user experience on your site and you are engaging with your users, continuing to make improvements and meeting their needs, that you will continue to get traffic on your site. So these things that we're providing today are ways that you can continue to improve your site, improve the accessibility. We also recommend doing things like usability testing, tree testing, card sorting, anything that you can do to show your users on your site that you're continuing to make improvements and enhancements. I know that doesn't really answer the question about what is going on with Google, but we can't really control Google. What we can control are the things that we're doing. So if we can make an optimized experience and then use the channels that we have to get our message out, then I think that that's the best we can do for right now until we get more information from Google about how their algorithms are working. Everyone is just kind of doing a little bit of guessing. There are some leaks out there and things like that. We've done a couple of webinars on those topics as well. But it's continually changing. So we got to control the things that we can control.
And I will jump in and say that we do know that Google flags sites that it considers to have poor UX and demotes them in their rankings from that leaked documentation that we saw early this year. So it's likely that Google's AI overviews at least reference the same ranking algorithm when generating AI responses. And so what you really want to kind of look at too is if we know what common questions are being asked in a search engine, if we can if we can start to answer those questions on our website, sometimes Google will pull that answer into its AI generated answer and link your website as the one that it pulled that information from. So that's a great way to still drive traffic. That does have, we start really dipping our toe into SEO, common search queries, and things like that. But making sure that you have good UX, knowing that Google flags sites with poor UX, it's going to prioritize you more when your UX is good and you're answering common questions that are being asked to Google. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach there.
That was a great answer. Thank you both. Okay, another question we have is, I am currently using an accessibility overlay today, like Accessibility or Userway or what have you. What are the steps to moving away from it?
All right, so I can tackle this one. So there are quite a few steps in doing that because you want to do it in a very holistic way that ensures that your website is going to meet all of the accessibility requirements that exist in the world. And there are a lot. So the first thing that we kind of recommend is you want to assess your current accessibility. So you can conduct a thorough accessibility audit of your website, and you can do this using development tools that we've kind of talked about that do scan the site from a code standpoint, and then also a lot of manual reviews using some of the takeaways we've talked about today and more to really assess where your site is falling short visually from an accessibility standpoint. So it's kind of a combination. And then, we always recommend a lot of user testing. So if you're trying to test your accessibility, finding an audience that has accessibility needs and using them as a group to test on is a really great way to uncover insights about that as well. So once you've established your baseline, then you want to prioritize the accessibility issues that need to be addressed, focusing on the critical ones that impact user experience and compliance first, and starting to work your way down to the less pressing and emergent ones. Again, this also, includes a lot of updating your source work, working with your developers to ensure the actual source code, using a proper HTML structure. So having your H1s and your H2s be very clear. For screen readers, that's really important. Because screen readers read based off of that HTML structure. So if you have a user that's relying on that, that HTML structure becomes a lot more important than just visual hierarchy. And then working on using ARIA attributes. So ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and then improving that keyboard navigation like Alma talked about. That's going to be a development lift. And then training your staff, educating your team, Inviting them to our webinars about accessibility is a great way to help. Just educating your whole team and making sure that when they're writing alt text, that it's, correct. When they're selecting buttons and button text, that it's the right color combinations. And then you want to document your accessibility efforts. Definitely keep a record. And if you even just start with one page at a time, just keeping a record of that, and eventually it'll make a really big impact, including, the steps taken, issues addressed, and feedback received. This documentation is really helpful for future compliance checks, audits, things like that, that really just make sure that you have your bases covered and that you're remediating the accessibility needs on your site. Very long-winded answer with a lot of steps.
I would just kind of encapsulate all that by saying start small. You don't have to redesign your entire website and throw everything out and start from scratch. If you can make one improvement on your site, that's one more than you had the day before, and then keep building on that. So there's lots and lots of steps to make your site totally accessible, but that's really hard to do. I mean, again, like we said at the top, only 2% of sites are really doing that. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And if we can just make those small incremental changes over time, then it'll make the web better for everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. You can't just do it in a day. You have to like set up those processes to do it for a while and then continue it. Like you can't just do it once and then get it done and think it's going to happen and stay that way. So it's definitely good feedback there, Alma and Joanna. We have another question. What AI tools can help me improve my accessibility?
Yep. So we do recommend using AI tools to give you kind of a starting point for things. So for example, when writing alt text, you can use some tools out there. Claude and ChatGPT are pretty good tools at writing alt text. But remember that those tools don't necessarily have all the context for how that image is being used. So if you upload an image into one of these tools like Claude or ChatGPT, they may just look at the image and then generate what they think they're seeing in the image and not necessarily what, like Joanna was saying earlier, what the context of that image is. So for example, you might upload a picture of, someone at your organization. And it may say image of a woman speaking or a woman standing in front of a group of people. But that's not necessarily wrong. So it's good as a starting point for having an alt text. But again, like Joanna was saying earlier, it would be more contextual and better if it said keynote speaker with their name talking at this conference, so that users, when they're seeing this or hearing it being read to them, they have more understanding about what the purpose of that image is. If you have a large amount of images that need alt text on your site, then using some of these AI tools and getting them set up can be a good way to start getting more of those images with alt text. But for now, try to write those as you're thinking about the images, as you're planning content on your site. That's really the best way to do that, so that they have the most accurate context for how the image is being displayed. And I can share an article. There was Dries, who is the creator of Drupal, which is a content management system that we use often, recently published an article about comparing, I think it was 12 different large language models, to see which one was the best at creating alt text for images. And so you can go and read his article. It's very in-depth. It talks about how he set things up, all the technology that was needed, and how he's planning on using it to cycle through, I think, like 9,000 images that need alt text. So some very interesting things to read out there.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Alma. Anything to add there, Joanna? Are we?
No, I think, it's almost spot on. We want to use it as supplementally, and, definitely if you have a large volume of images that don't have alt text, you want to make sure you get alt text in there as quickly as possible. But AI can really be a really great tool to help you get it in quickly, but being very mindful about creating kind of an equitable experience in terms of meaning. It's the biggest thing. So
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. And then we have time for one more. If I wanted to make my website more accessible today, We already talked about its journey, but
Mhm.
today, let's look at today. After this webinar, I want to go back. I want to get started. Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we like what Alma was saying, start small. And even if you take one page, look at it through the lens of accessibility, run some of these scans and tools like that we've provided, find out what those issues are, and then just take it a page at a time if you have to. And some of the big things that you can look for are that color contrast, meeting those WCAG 2.2 AA requirements, and ensuring all of that like all of your images have color contrast, and throwing kind of another one out here that these scanner tools won't really pick up, but looking at your actual button language, and instead of something saying like learn more or read here, even just using more context in your CTA language is creating an accessible experience, and it's something that you can fix very quickly on the fly that requires no development work. So we would say really look at those things first, and those are some quick wins that that have a lot of return on their investment. They make a really big impact quickly.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. I think the other thing to remember when you're thinking about accessibility is that there's always an alternative. So even if you're working with developers or you're locked into a system that has a lot of limitations from a programmatic perspective, or maybe you can't content author or change colors of things, think about alternative ways that you could maybe accomplish the same thing using a different tool that you do have access to. So we've definitely done some studies and research into tools that the code was very locked down. We didn't have access to making a lot of changes. So then it was putting our brains together and figuring out, okay, well, how can we accomplish this same thing, but using the tools that we do have? So I would just say keep trying. If you run into a roadblock, try to figure out a way to kind of flow around it instead of it becoming a stopper.
Yeah. And a lot of content changes that you can make just on the front end allow a site to be a lot more accessible. So the development part is important for sure, but it shouldn't overwhelm you and stop you from making a lot of good content changes today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much for joining us today. If there are other topics that you would like for us to talk about, please reach out and let us know, because we are building our continued webinar our calendar for the rest of the year. So anything you want to know that maybe we touched on a little bit today, you want us to go deeper, please let us know, and we definitely would be able to create some new content for you.
Also, later
go ahead.
today, you're going to
Mhm.
receive an email with the link to the slides that we presented today. There'll also be a little link to a survey in there. So if you have a couple of minutes and you'd like to fill out a survey to give us some additional information, that's another place that you can indicate topics that you'd like to see in the future. And then next week on Thursday, you'll receive a final email from us about this webinar that will have the link to the video and any additional information that we have to provide. Oh, and the transcript as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alma.
Yep.
And as well, please go to our website and sign up for any of our newsletters. It's at the bottom, close to the footer. We do send out monthly newsletters that have rich content like this, more in blog forms, but also gives you updates of where we're speaking soon. So with that, we'll give you all 2 minutes back in your day. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And definitely good accessibility is good UX. So have a great day and enjoy yourselves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Take care.